Hi everyone, and welcome to today's product leadership webinar. I'm Andrew and I'm the Business Development Manager for Method Recruitment. It's been fantastic to see so many people registered for this event, and I'm really excited to be emceeing for Sav, Evan and Vakul today. As I share, I guess, a few pearls of wisdom from their experiences as product leaders during COVID. More on them in just a moment, but first a disclaimer for everyone. Today's session will be recorded as it's going up on the Method Recruitment YouTube channel, which I'll share with you afterwards. But important to note, if you don't wish to be recorded, feel free to turn your camera off. I know that a bunch of you will probably have your lunch because I requested you guys to bring it along, but we're not too worried about that. If you could have your camera on, otherwise that would be excellent, as we want to try and make this as interactive as possible between everyone. There'll also be an opportunity for questions at the end of each talk for a few minutes, and then some more time reserved at the end for any leftover ones. So if you have any questions as well, please at any time feel free to pop them in the chat, and I'll ask them to the guys after each talk. So some quick intros on the guys before we dive in. First up, we've got Sav. So Sav started his career in risk management at PwC, and by chasing opportunities across the globe in financial services, technology, government, wagering, and the more he built up a war chest of experiences that have enabled him to become a really successful product leader over time. He's now utilising his experiences at Product Box to help other companies bring new products to life. Next up, we've got Evan, who's the product director at 99 Designs. Evan loves working with people on complex problems that have a genuine impact on people's lives. In each of his recent roles, he's had the opportunity to spend time with customers, try and understand their needs and how his product teams can help them. Currently, he's working on bringing design and creativity to small businesses around the world and helping them bring their brands to life by connecting them with our incredible creative community. And lastly, but certainly not least, Vakul has been at Afterpay for the last 2 years and currently leads the global product function for registration, checkout, and servicing. Prior to Afterpay, he worked for 4 years at PayPal, where he led the product function for PayPal Credit in Europe and Australia, and launched new products like PayPal Working Capital and PayPal Credit. Prior to this, he worked 8.5 years at GE Capital, commonly known now as Latitude Financial Services, where he held various product tech leadership roles. Cool. So without further ado, let's kick things off with Sav. Thanks, mate.
No problems, mate. I'll share my screen. Just give me a sec. Cool. Can you see that?
Yep.
Cool. Firstly, thanks for having us, mate. Really excited about today. Hopefully I won't take more than 10 minutes and then I can answer a few questions. As we know, I think the COVID-19 pandemic is probably the largest health crisis we've seen in 100 years or so. The crisis impact everyone in so many different ways. And I think one thing is definitely for sure, we experience crises more often than every 100 years. And they could be personally and professionally, and they could happen, once a year or multiple times a year. And today, I want to just take some time to talk about 3 simple steps to take in a crisis, and really whatever the crisis today being Are You OK Day as well. I think that these steps can sort of help you reframe, so use it as an opportunity to build strength that not only enables your product and your business, but also personally and in your career to sort of better withstand the future. You might be wondering why there's a random picture of me on the front of this. And I'll tell you it's because I've seen a few of you on there that I know, and you all know that I love CrossFit. So I thought I would intertwine a story about CrossFit with professional experience. So then you can sort of see how it's applicable, how the 3 steps can be applied to personal crises as well as professional crises. So reframing. So a crisis, in my books, like crises create constraints, and really simply that can be time constraint, it can be a money constraint, it can be physical interaction like we've seen currently. And actually the picture on the left is me in 2019, and I'm partaking in something called the CrossFit Open, which is sort of like it's like a worldwide competition. I'm definitely not a elite athlete, but I love competing in that. I love doing CrossFit. And just a few weeks prior to this, I actually severely damaged my AC joint, which is in my shoulder. And I did that because I was stupidly trying to walk on my hands. I'd never walked on my hands before. I just tried to walk on my hands and I didn't have much planning and experience. I fell and I significantly damaged my AC shoulder. And so I sort of pushed that to the side. I really wanted to compete in these games, and I thought I'm just going to squat and become a really strong squatter. And so I started squatting, and I squatted a stupid amount, and then I screwed up my back. And this is really lesson number 1. So I think in a crisis, and that was a crisis for me, you know, personally, I really love doing it. If I'm not working out, I'm not really the same person. You can ignore, and that's exactly what I did. I ignored and I kept moving on, and I hurt my back, and fortunately that sort of gave me the breathing room to really step back and assess and look at my goals, look at my pain points, an approach that might help me get better than what I used to be. I started speaking to others, and one of the things that I identified was like form. So it's something that I just focused on. I took off all the weight. I just used a bar. I worked on my squat form. Once my shoulder was okay, I worked on my handstand form against a wall. And putting this in a professional context, at Product Box, we've done this for a number of our clients, but we were lucky enough right just before the pandemic to actually be doing this with one of our fintech customers. And we were doing some strategy work with them, looking at their goals, their industry, their competitors, talking to their customers, understanding their problems. And this business is actually successful in its own right. It's already successful. But we looked at, what was holding it back from being more successful. And in their instance, it wasn't the people, it wasn't the process, it wasn't their product, it was more technology. And specifically for them, it was like a CRM legacy system they'd had for many years that was holding them back. It was inflexible. And so we made a pretty bold decision and quickly moved to something called HubSpot, which is a CRM system I'm sure most of you know. And that has ended up giving them a lot of data and a lot of flexibility during this pandemic, which is a great way they've been able to push on through the pandemic and actually use that to digitize a lot of their processes. Lesson number 2 is really about weakness versus neglected. So, I talked about my squat and my handstand. They were always my biggest weaknesses. And I just, put them aside as their weaknesses. They're always going to be weaknesses. It's not something that I can really do about it. But once this happened to me, I started to think about, well, maybe it's because I'm neglecting the areas around my back or the areas around my shoulder. And so I started to do a lot of things around building and isolating like muscles like scaps and glutes and things like that. And I found that really helped me from a recovery perspective. And similarly, if I put this into a professional context, for a number of our customers, once again on this fintech customer, super strong with sales and marketing, always discounted the fact that they were weak at customer onboarding actually. And they did that because of multiple things, but predominantly because the industry has some constraints around physical signatures, which they were unsure about. And what we did with them was actually just to look at the end-to-end process and work on peripheral services. So like notifications and data analytics, and really presenting that back to them so they understand where the bottlenecks are, and significantly improving the time from sale to onboarding. And it's certainly not a strength for them as yet, for sure, but we've halved the time. They know where the bottlenecks are, and really they're well on their way to making this a strength, which is really good for their business over the long term. And finally, for me, this is a really big one. It's around no capability versus building a DIY capability. And so, if I take it to my exercise sort of example, no capability for me was really like, I had a trainer for 5 years. I just did what he said. I didn't really think about it too much until I got injured. And then I started reading and spending hours on YouTube and spending hours on Instagram and trying to investigate how to best fix some of these issues and learn, what's going to help those specific areas, and speaking to physios, and that helped me build a capability. And I'm not saying I'm an expert in any of those areas, but it's sort of like that DIY home hardware sort of capability that I was able to build. And so since that time, I've been able to reduce the number of injuries, improve the way in which I train. And I think that is super important for a business as well. With our smallest, our medium, and even our large enterprise customer, we are talking about this one thing, and that is that, like, in the world, I think there's about 27 million software developers, and that's about 1% of the workforce. So like 99% of us are trying to get 1% to digitize everything. So it is a huge bottleneck. You're seeing that now in COVID. In the UK, no one can get married because the marriage process is all manual and paper-based. And so for our client and a number of our clients, we've been trying to narrow down the tools and build capability in no code within their organization. And that's allowed them to really automate and digitize processes internally, and they'll continue to do that over the long run, so they can focus on high value items, focus on customer service, and actually be speaking more to their customers. They're not doing the repetitive and administrative tasks. And we've done a number of tools, but just to give you an example, like almost all of them use Zapier, which is really popular. Typeform, sort of super simple to use, and you can use it for onboarding, really amazing. Webflow for websites, Card for sort of landing pages, and Shopify for our retail customer, that has allowed their team to like internally make changes and create a DIY capability. And I'm not saying they can make significant changes, but there's longevity, and they can make sort of incremental changes that will help them over the long run. Overall, I think that, from a personal perspective, following that approach has helped me, lift my squat and my shoulder strength 20%, and sort of set up a foundation through the capability, et cetera, to withstand greater pressure. And I think with the clients that we have, we've followed this same sort of 3-step. I think it's really simple to understand and implement. We've helped our clients with this, and one has seen revenue growth for sure. And, they were bold, they stepped back, they addressed the neglected areas, and, they did really well. The others and obviously they built capability as well. The others haven't seen yet revenue growth yet, but I think that, such as a small retailer for us, they shifted to Shopify, they've tweaked some operational manufacturing processes, but they haven't seen revenue growth. But I sort of feel that that's a lagging indicator, and the good leading indicator for us is that, they're speaking to customers more, they have the headroom to do more product development, new product development, which is great. So hopefully in that last quarter, they'll have a good quarter. If people maybe start traveling and going on holiday, a few things need to go right as well. So I think that is it for me. I hope the 3 steps, like stepping back and assessing, looking at neglected areas around the weak areas, and looking at where your organization can build some DIY level capability, can really help you turn it from like a constraint into a strength, and a strength that will help you withstand the future a bit better as well. Cool, that's me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sav.
No problem.
It's pretty amazing actually how you can stand on your hands like that, mate. It was actually one of my 30-day challenges during COVID to learn to handstand, and I think I lasted about 4 days before I gave up. So you've got a lot more discipline in that department than I do, mate. Has anyone got any questions for Sav? All right, all good. I think we're about bang on time anyway. So, Evan, let's move on to you, mate.
Well, Sav, I don't know if you're still sharing. Oh, you've stopped. Cool.
Cool.
Thanks. Caveat, I have been having some internet challenges, so hopefully you can all hear me, if not see me. I'm running without slides, so if you can't see me, it won't be the end of the world. Obviously, I'm from 99 Designs. We're a global platform that helps small businesses predominantly connect with graphic designers to create amazing brands and logos. And so that's probably what you know us best for, but we do a variety of other things. The Zoom background you see today is designed by Alice in our community of creators. I love it, one of my favorites. But there's lots of other things out there you can grab onto as well. The other thing I just want to recognize is obviously with COVID, there's a lot of people who are still struggling. In our time, this is something we've not seen before. And I think it definitely leads to situations where we feel very insular and you kind of want to draw back in. And that kind of leads me to, I guess, the first thing of my points I wanted to talk about is from a product perspective, times like this, like it's very easy to sort of pull away, but really we want to lead with empathy. And for me, that covers both the people in your team, your staff, your colleagues, your customers, the user communities that you work with. All of these people are really relevant and they're all impacted by these crises in some way. And actually it's a very positive thing to reach out to them at this time. And that can really help you understand what problems they're facing and their challenges. And it gives you an opportunity to actually help them. And there are lots of different ways you can do that. At 99, when we kind of like first realized what was going on, we were really quick to move to reach out to our customers. Some of the things that we did was sort of, I still remember from like March 12 or 13, when the world went crazy, we very quickly, got a survey out to our customers, within a couple of weeks and started to understand how is your business being impacted. Our support team moved really quickly and started to identify customers that maybe needed to defer work or were having troubles financially, that as a result of things that had happened even within those first couple of weeks. And some of us did the old-fashioned thing and just got on the phone ourselves and spoke to people. And the benefit of doing that was that we actually were able to not just adapt our own strategy, but really figure out, well, what are the things that our customers need at this time, and pivot our offering. And so like one of the many things we learned, and it's a pretty obvious one when you think about it, is like bricks and mortar retailers were trying to move to get online. And this is something that I guess traditional retailers hadn't really kind of got into, but we saw that they had a really strong need to do this. The interesting thing that we found out is like, oh yeah, okay, cool, I'll get a website. It's not just a website though. The process of taking your business from a physical standpoint, being able to take orders, process those orders, package your product, all of those steps along the way, there are different needs that emerge. And if you haven't done that, then that becomes really quite challenging. So for us, you know, had we not taken the time to actually reach out and empathize with our customers and understand the pain they were going through and what they were trying to do in order to keep their businesses going, then we, you know, and if we just kept blindly doing the same thing we were doing before, we would have missed that great opportunity to help them. The flip side of us doing that is we actually then could go to our community of designers and say, hey, here's what we're hearing from customers, here are their needs. We can give you some data and some advice on how you can now support those people. And so actually we're able to help both sides of the market come together and help people keep their businesses running. And for the freelancers, obviously trying to keep them in work as well. But it really comes back to like just not being worried about connecting with people. Personal connection is just so important. The second point is kind of like getting to the nuts and bolts of product management, I believe, and it's like, how do we empower people to use the skills that they've got? And I actually saw this work really well, both at 99 in recent months, but also I don't know if I'd call it the good fortune to be at PageUp when they were hacked, but I think the things that I learned were very good. And allowing people to self-assemble around their strengths and their skills and then empowering them to use them is a really, really key thing to getting through a crisis. What it does is it creates a really strong focus. So by being clear on what the problem is that you want teams to solve becomes really important. And in a crisis, you're almost forced to pick, well, what is the next most urgent thing that I need to fix? Aligning people with their strengths means that their contribution is also really, really high, because they, you know, these are things that they know how to do. And then that's ability to make decisions really quickly. You want to unencumber people, and by having clear focus, knowing that the people who are doing the work have the skills and are aligned to the right area, means that you can then allow them to make faster decisions. And yeah, an example in 99 of this was that we could see from some of our clients that they were likely to have staffing issues. They were inevitably going to be downsizing. We'd already seen lots of media reports of people being let go, which is very sad. And so like the question became, well, how can we help? How can we help these organizations continue to not be in that position? And so we were able to bring together a really rapid cross-functional team to stand up new offerings that we believe could help, you know, these different set of customers who are under financial pressure, connect with people who could help them deliver, whether it's, you know, communication capability or design capability to keep their marketing teams alive, basically. And so, you know, we brought together people from product development, copywriters, support team members, business development team members, and we empowered them to say, hey, go and speak to customers, find out what they need, find out what their problems are, come back, whatever you can get your hands on, you can use and just run at solving this problem. And so they were able to actually test a number of different propositions to the point where we've actually launched a couple of products off the back of the work that they did during that time. And this was all, you know, during high pressure craziness all around us. But again, that connection with the customer, and I think empathizing and aligning people's skills behind it really enabled us to get a good understanding of what people were looking for, which allowed us to step forward. So similarly at PageUp, I saw the same self-organization, mainly of our development team, very much going, right, who's got what skills in what area and how do we progress? And that fast decision making is an extremely empowering thing for people. And we managed to really work our way through those crises using that method. The last piece that I think is also kind of like one thing that I've found, teams I've worked in as product people, so we kind of get into like, hey, fast iterations and we're constantly evolving, but we don't stop and think, hey, how can we simplify the experience for our customer? And again, thinking of, customers or our community members who are under a stressful situation, how do we make things super simple for them? And so during COVID, we really went back and kind of stepped back to basics almost, in like, how are we presenting our product? How's our website structured? What pages do we want people to be looking at? And what is the most important information for them on those pages? And this this was a very internally focused piece for us. So like less about, we'd done the work to understand people's needs. This was now like internally, how do we structure ourselves to better communicate those things to our clients? And therefore, having that knowledge, having started with the empathy, having aligned the teams, meant that we could now very quickly move to make the changes. So pulling the data around what it was people were looking to get done, bring that information to our homepage. Are there any additional services we offer that people are not aware of? When I spoke about retailers going online, hey, let's create a collection of products that are going to really help people build the infrastructure they need to be a successful online business, even though 2 weeks ago they weren't even thinking about it. So bringing all of those things together, and then just thinking, how do we make this really, really simple for the customer? And so that the cool thing on top of what we were able to do is, culturally, because we'd set up this way, we also were able to change a number of things that I guess people had thought were going to be really difficult to change in the past. So it really did give a sense of empowerment to the teams, and they really were able to make great progress. And actually, everyone was very excited at the work that we did. Yes, it was long. Yes, it was hard. Yes, it was stressful, but it was very rewarding at the same time. And we've seen our customers continue to get a great result. We've seen our community of designers continue to flourish. I think being a remote work platform in itself was very helpful. But we certainly went through some rough moments like everyone else did. And so I think my reflection in the lead up to today was, what are those things that we went through? And so what worked really well for us was leading with empathy, like listening to our customers first, just the importance of that. Making sure people are empowered and have focus. They know what the problem is that they're trying to solve, and that the mission is to make it really, really simple for our customers. And I think even if you're not in a crisis, those are 3 really good principles as product people that we should be following all the time. That's it from me.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Evan. I've actually got a question for you, mate. I was just listening to Simon Sinek, the motivational speaker, interview the CEO of Airbnb through LinkedIn the other day, and the CEO of Airbnb was very, very focused on, I guess, getting the employees, the workers' mentality right. You can have all the tools in the world to succeed, and the best infrastructure, like you said, to roll out a business model to get through something like this. But if you don't have the right mental state of your employees, then all the rest just becomes background noise. I guess the situation with you guys being a remote working kind of platform compared to an Airbnb platform where people actually have to physically travel is very different. But how important was getting the mindset right in order to be able to move with speed and kind of change things for you guys at 99 Designs?
I think, really different context, but equally as stressful and important to get that mindset right. And, it was very easy for us to transition to Zoom meetings because we already were a global organization with lots of different offices and the capability to do so. But the thing that really kind of stood out for me was the empathy for our staff. And, as a leadership team, that was a high priority right from the very beginning. We made some sacrifices ourselves, salary-wise and things like that at the very beginning, to lead the way. That was important to us. we involved all of our teams in the planning of the work that we wanted to do. It was as much, teams bringing ideas up as it was leadership teams saying, hey, here's where we think we need to focus. So we kept and maintained a very flat structure and approach in that time. And then we've done a lot of things to really care for our people. So we offer, if you want to work 80% time, you can now do that because we recognize people have kids at home. But obviously you can still work full time. I do. I have the luxury of the kids are old enough that they do their own homeschooling. They don't need me so much. Just this Monday, we had a company funded day off. So everyone who's been working so hard and dealing with, the Melbourne lockdown stress, we decided that it would just be a good idea to give everyone a long weekend. And we did that globally for all of our teams, in recognition of the hard work and the stressful situation that everyone is under. So I think, there are pros and cons for the different contexts. We're not reliant on people having to be in the same location at the same time. But I think, employees and teams are still going through a difficult transition and getting really comfortable with how to actually do work in this way. And we normally would do quarterly planning. We did planning twice in one quarter during the really sort of early stages of COVID. And I was amazed at how well we did, but it was definitely hard work and a stressful environment. So taking the time, I think, like Sav was saying, like, step back, look at what is going on around you and try and understand that, and then take some step forward is some really good advice.
Great. Does anyone else have any questions for Evan before we move on?
Hey, Evan, it's Sav. I know you mentioned empowering employees, and I think that's so super important. How have you found that, though, when people are working from home and they're sort of isolated? Have you found circumstances where without, being able to bounce ideas off people in a physical context, it's made them a little bit more anxious about having that empowerment? Or has that not been a problem?
I actually think, strangely enough, that idea that it would be a little bit more challenging kind of was my natural assumption. We haven't really seen that. We've really seen people dive in. I think the sense of the strength of our culture and the desire to really push the organization forward in this time has kind of overridden that, and not all organizations necessarily have that. So I feel quite fortunate to work at 99. Some of the things we've tried to do is get really good with documentation and asynchronous work, because obviously Zoom calls all day gets pretty tiring, and that can have a drain and effect. So like being connected in different ways, and making sure that things are documented and people are clear on their focus, whether you use OKRs or other methods. I think having those things really clear means that people don't have questions. Like they know what they're working on, they know what their goals are, and you kind of take the mystery out of those pieces. People can get on with what they love doing. And I think because we're a very pretty dev heavy company, a lot of the devs like working at home anyway, so they've enjoyed some aspects of it.
I think that's super important, the point you mentioned about documentation. And I've been reading a lot from Jason Fried from Basecamp, and they've obviously been working remotely for a long time. And a lot of, what they say in that is like, shaping up the idea to a position, and with the right documentation, that it is clear to the person that is taking that on, because that clarity is super important in a remote context as well. So yeah, definitely agree with that point.
Awesome, thanks for that, Evan. All right, Vakul, you're up, mate.
Thanks, Andrew. I have a few slides that I'll just show to everybody. I think my presentation is a bit extension of what Evan was presenting itself, right? Like, how do you plan for crisis and how do you basically come out of crisis itself? I feel like, in crisis, basically, there are a few things. Companies keep on moving in and out of these matrices and boxes, right? Like if you have a great product market fit or growth, like you're growing like crazy, and like your company is not as efficient itself, right? You will still keep on hiring or growing, or basically either you'll freeze, but you might hire still more because if your growth is really high, which is the top. Product market fit is growth is very strong. And unfortunately, like in crisis, what happens is sometimes companies basically come into the bottom side of it where the product market fit hasn't been great, right? Like hospitality will be a great industry right now where we know they're going to be in lockdown for like 8 to 9 months, right? If you're in lockdown, what do? You either pivot your way or you wait out the crisis, right? Or you basically shut shop, right? So, and this basically comes out like, this is a bit of a thing I got from, news website I basically subscribe to is like, tech is on the path of the growth, right? Like if you're in tech, you can see it, everything in tech is basically growing. It's almost like, Shopify, I think the stock price has gone 5 times or 6 times. Amazon is still growing, Apple is still growing. So, there are industries which are keep on growing on, but then at the same time, you can see where Uber, you would have never thought would have been in that matrix where, their product market fit in a crisis wasn't the best, right? Uber Eats is, but not Uber as the whole platform itself. And obviously there have been some redundancies, and you can see the correlation. There's Uber, there's Lyft, these transportation companies. So I think crisis by itself, right? Like question is, how do you prepare for a crisis? Basically, I was reflecting for this presentation going back in Jan this year. Like I was sitting on a beach in Williamstown, right? And enjoying the summer weather and thinking, oh my God, how hot it is. And there's some challenges happening in other parts of the region or other parts of the world. Like I didn't predict, nobody predicted like, in March or April, we'll have world economy shutting down for like up to 9 months, year, or maybe 2 years, right? Who knows how long the shutdown is going to last. So for me, they're just unpredictable events, right? Like GFC, nobody predicted it. Like they're completely unpredictable events. I remember, I think there was a saying, Muhammad Ali or someone had that, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, and crises sometimes are like that, right? Like how do you plan for this unpredictable event? And I just wanted to put in some points for everybody, right? I think like, how do you plan for unpredictability is the toughest part for me. Like, for me, like there are 4 key things. Firstly, it's like be close to the pulse of the consumers, right? Understand like, and this is basically stretching from what Evan and even Sap said, right? Like, be close to the consumer, understand how habits are changing, right? Like in a way, we as a company like Afterpay came in from, people's changing habits after the financial crisis, where they said like, I don't want so much debt and I'm not going to take on credit so much. I want better ways to manage myself. And I feel COVID will be another one, which will be interesting to see, what amazing innovation and opportunities come out, right? But with these financial crises, great opportunities come out because people's habits and needs shift, right? Sorry, I've got my daughter here next to me. Eva, give me a second, baby. Then the second one is, for me, is have the ability to react very, very fast, right? Like have the ability to react quickly to market conditions. And, this is also key for me, like in a way, sometimes it can take a long time to react to conditions. And that basically means if someone else can capitalize on that opportunity, then you might lose out, right? So the ability to pivot or create new capabilities very fast. And then keep experimenting, right? In product, sometimes, we have a bit of a hypothesis. We go with the hypothesis thinking like, hey, this is the best hypothesis and stuff. But everything is a hypothesis and opinions unless you test with consumers. Testing with consumers at a 2 level, you can do lots of user research and usability testing itself, which is great. But at the same time, the question is, how do you test it in scale? And how do you stay close to the consumers and understand that how was the feedback loop? Did it work? Did it not work? Was it good enough for them or not, right? So I think experimenting and really testing it is key. And, we as a company also and even in PayPal and other companies, it's been critical, right? Testing lots of things out with consumers all the time. And then finally is for me is when crisis hits, everyone gets together, even different groups that you haven't mixed around with or worked with, there is a real camaraderie that really comes in, right? You really, as product, we have to partner very closely with sales teams, marketing teams, risk teams to see what innovation, capabilities, features, new things, or tweaking of existing things we can bring in to basically evolve our product set through this crisis, right? So for me, that's maybe those are some key things in how do you handle unpredictability, right? And yeah, that was pretty much it. So maybe I ran through that pretty quickly. Yeah.
Very informative there, mate. Thank you. I guess this may be a question on a few people's minds because when I think about Afterpay, I think about it an organisation that was almost kind of tailor-made for a crisis like this, and that you guys are, I guess, in the game of buy now, pay later, and in a situation where people are kind of a lot more focused on tracking where every dollar goes, and 2, they're stuck at home and they're no longer buying things in store, they're buying things online. I guess that's kind of 2 reasons why Afterpay has continued to do reasonably well. I mean, my question is, did you still have to look at things that needed changing within the existing business model and changing them with speed, like you said, or was it very much a case of, look, this is actually going to suit us quite well, let's keep doing what we're doing and stick to very, very closely to the consumer in that respect?
No, we had to really think still very quickly, right? Because it was such an unpredictable event, we didn't know what the future was, right? We didn't know, how long the lockdowns are going to last. Everybody thought in March when the lockdowns come in, they'll be 6 to 8 weeks, right? But obviously, in hindsight, those are wrong. So we had to really move quickly. I think this is public. We made some risk decisions to, strengthen some of our risk rules, for example. So, we did decide to do these things and we decided to move very quickly on these because, yeah, if we didn't, we would have paid the price for it right now. As I go back to this slide back of mine, in a way we were on the top, right? In terms of, because obviously, as you said, the crisis, everybody's at home, everybody's buying online, and we were seeing phenomenal growth. But still, we had to move very, very, very quickly on a lot of things.
Hey, Vakul, it's Evan. I had one question. About the testing. I'm a big advocate of testing as well. Did you guys change anything during kind of that, I guess, between March and now in terms of how you approach testing, time pressures to respond to the changing conditions, or did you hold firm on this is kind of our way of doing it?
Yeah, I'll say we already had, Evan, a really robust way of testing. We do a lot of A/B testing all the time, right? Like we basically do a lot of A/B testing globally. I think what we had to do though was realign some of our priorities and what we wanted to test, right? And maybe accelerating some of the ramps and some tests that we wanted to enable, right? So I think it was more like we had the infrastructure already set up from A/B testing side of it. It was more the priorities and the ramping of some of those tests that we wanted to really evolve. But yeah, like, testing is critical for me.
Excellent. Does anyone from the audience have any questions for Vakul? Cool, simple. I actually had another question, mate. It's probably more around kind of protecting what you guys have been able to grow over time. I mean, we're seeing a huge influx of other organisations kind of cotton on to the kind of rocket ship that is the buy now, pay later sector of the market. Just seeing, I mean, Latitude with Latitude. I'm not sure what the product is that they're releasing, but I was having a bit of a look. They've got a new product in the market. Organisations like Cecil and Co. Very curious to know kind of how you guys are looking to protect what you've built in that respect from the competition.
Yeah, like I think competition is great. Like we love competition, and everybody's coming with amazing products and amazing new capabilities, right? Like, so it's amazing to see the innovation that is really coming into this space. So I think it's great to see that. I think for us, it's basically like, we're very, very, very consumer, like not to say other organization not, but we really think from the consumer simplicity side. And, this is also going back to a bit of the Evans principles, like, keep it simple. Right? Like that was the real big thing for us. Right? And build that trust. We wanted to build that trust with the consumer. And luckily, like we have great trust from a consumer perspective also. So I think that really goes a long way in building that loyalty and that frequency where a consumer trusts the brand itself. Right? So yeah, so those are some aspects that we basically really, really hold true to.
Great. Just before we wrap up, guys, I've got a quick question for each of you. If each of you could tell the audience what has been your single biggest product challenge that you've had to face since the start of COVID.
I'll say for me, it was basically like, I think it was a bit of that remote working, like, just making sure, right? Like, we were working in such disparate global organization. Like we had teams in San Francisco, in UK and Australia and everywhere. I think in the start, it was basically really making sure everybody was aligned, right? Which took a bit of working because, everybody went from face to face. We still did a bit of remote working, but not 100%, right? Like, I think that was in the start, like more communication and coordination was the big one.
I'm gonna say hiring actually, because I think that, and it's to my question I think before to Evan, because I think that there's some people that can deal with a lack of clarity at home and in the workplace, but maybe not at the same time actually. And in hiring, and that's unfortunately, I think sometimes there's a bit of that happens in the environment that we're in. Like you don't know what's happening outside, like when are we coming out of lockdown, when are my kids going to go back to school, all of those sorts of things. And then you go into the workforce, and if the workforce is like, startup in nature, and there's lots of things that you don't have clarity on, and you want that person to go out and bring clarity to the team. That sort of person is difficult to find, and often I found that people can get quite overwhelmed in that instance, and yeah, I think that it's unfortunate, and we've changed a few ways of working to help deal with that. But I think in this current environment, like finding those people that can deal with the lack of clarity is quite difficult. Yeah.
From my perspective, I think just the level of uncertainty that is in front of us kind of makes prioritization tricky. And because we run a two-sided marketplace, we're constantly trying to balance between customer and creator. And so what do you do for who and in what order, and how you balance strategic things that you may not see material impacts on your business in the short term versus everyone's in freak out mode and wants to see some positive change immediately. And I think everyone has that natural tension anyway, but in a crisis, I think that becomes even harder because you don't have a sense, particularly for global businesses. It's like, hey, Melbourne's struggling. The rest of Australia is starting to return to normal, but what's happening in the US, what's happening in Brazil, what's happening in Europe? And then how do you prioritize the things that are important to have impact and help people in all those markets is definitely a very complex process to go through.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. I've got a question here from Fernando from Amazon. Thanks, Fernando. People are talking about 10 years worth of digital transformation being fast-tracked by this crisis. Do you agree, or do you see e-commerce going back to 2019 levels? Who wants to answer that one?
I definitely think that there's going to be a lot of digitization. I think I spoke just before I mentioned that, there's only 1% of the workforce that are software developers, and now we're coming into a period where there's like a plethora of no-code tools that people are really beginning to use to help build businesses, help digitize, and I think that it's not just the software developers that can do that. So if those people have those skills, Bubble's a tool. It's not super easy to use, but it can allow you to build a marketplace, for example. And I think that with that capability in the hands of a lot more people, we'll definitely see more and more processes being digitized, and especially I think in the government sector as well. That's really going to be fast-tracked as a result of this crisis, I think.
Be really interested to hear your thoughts on that one, Vakul.
Yeah, I don't think they'll go back to 2019 levels. I don't think it'll go back to 2019 levels. Will they definitely increase the penetration and stuff? Like in Australia, e-commerce was at like 8 or 9%. UK is already pretty high. It's at like 25%, and US was like around 13 or 14%, right? They will definitely increase. Like the question is going to be like by how much, right? Like I think once this COVID situation eases down, people will go back to in-store and retail and stuff. But it's been great to see that many organizations have had to really up their digital capabilities, right? Like all the way from Bunnings and Woolworths, who were like so much in store, if you look at it, right, to the mom and pop shops that have had to do that.
Yeah, great. I was talking to a client the other day. I think of Ozpost, for example, they had 5 years of growth in the e-commerce space in their parcels business in 5 months. I mean, it has been for all the challenges that we've seen. Certain companies, it's been fantastic for this. I hate to say it, but it's through crisis comes opportunity, right?
Yeah, I think even like you look at Reece, I think it was the end of the year, so annual general meetings are happening, and like all of that stuff was face to face in the past. And like, you know, APRA's releasing guidance on what to do in a virtual meeting. Like, I honestly didn't even know that was a problem that existed. I was like, what? We can't do annual general meetings online? I thought that would definitely be a thing, but it shows how far behind we are in some of the sectors.
Indeed. We've got one more question here, guys, before we wrap up, from Jack. Thanks, Jack. During COVID-19, the focus has been on the challenges we've faced, and rightly so, but what is your proudest moment / achievement in the face of uncertainty over the last 6 months?
I have to say, from my perspective, I've worked with a couple of organisations and are not software developers, and they've really picked up a lot of no-code tools, particularly like HubSpot and Zapier, and like using those two to automate workflows, and that's a pretty proud moment, because you know, that's something that they can use even after the crisis to really automate some of their processes, and so they can spend more time doing high value work. And I think, you know, my wife's business, I've been speaking to her about it. She doesn't really listen to me, but I've been speaking to her about it, and we're going to do the same there. And so, yeah, I think that's probably my best takeaway.
Yeah, like I think for me was proudest is again how quickly our teams evolved to working in the new model, and how, you know, like, you know, the efficiency and the speed with which we were doing stuff pretty much maintained, right? Like, so that was amazingly like great to see, and how collaborative also people became. Like, in a way, people became even more collaborative in some ways, because they knew, like, you know, now I can't go face to face and just tap the person on the shoulder. So, you know, even that try to be more collaborative was great to see that.
I would echo both of those things. Probably the other thing I would add is just the tenacity and bravery that the teams at 99 have shown. And so your willingness to try things, a willingness to potentially fail in this moment, but to remain positive and keep driving our product forward. I think that's been the proudest thing for me. And then, you know, to see the way that organizationally we've also invested in our people kind of gives me a really good vibe. And when you see people, I know lots of companies doing this kind of stuff, you know, you send swag out to your teams and you see how grateful people are, you know, for those shows of support from your organization. And I think that makes you feel pretty good.
Awesome, guys. We're 1 o'clock on the dot. I know even for one, mate, you've got to shoot off to something else, but thank you guys so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It was really informative. Some real kind of nuggets of gold, hopefully, that the audience can take and back to their companies and kind of move forward. As I discussed before, this is going on to our YouTube channel, guys. So I'll be sharing that with everyone. After this, over the next couple of days, there will also be a white paper being sent out to everyone who attended as well. So, so again, Evan, Sav, Vakul, really appreciated your time. We'll see you at the next one, hopefully.
No drama. Anytime, mate.
The opportunity.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.
See you guys.
See you all.
Bye.